Imagine holding a golden Oscar in your hands at age 12, feeling like the world is yours, only to end up in an unmarked mass grave because no one knew your name. Hollywood is famous for its bright lights, but it's even better at casting long, cold shadows. Today, we're not looking at the stars on the Walk of Fame. We're looking at the people who were once the biggest names in the room, but somehow, when the end came, they were facing it in total silence and absolute anonymity. Number 1. Bobby Driscoll. In 1950, Bobby Driscoll stood on the stage of the Academy Awards, holding a miniature Oscar for his outstanding contribution as a child actor. He was the golden boy of the Disney empire, the living reference for Peter Pan. But the industry has a very short memory for children who grow up. The moment Bobby hit puberty, his contract was abruptly canceled, and the studio gates he once owned effectively locked him out. By the mid-1960s, the boy who taught a generation to fly was struggling to keep his feet on the ground in the gritty streets of New York. He didn't just fade away. He was erased from the public consciousness while he was still walking among them. In 1968, some kids playing in an abandoned East Village tenement found a body lying on a cot, surrounded by empty beer bottles. There was no ID, and no one in the neighborhood knew who he was. He was buried as a John Doe in a mass grave on Hart Island. It took over a year for his family to use fingerprint records to realize that the person the world had discarded was their son. It's a stark reminder that in Hollywood, your value is often tied to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Number 2. Veronica Lake. In the early 1940s, Veronica Lake's peekaboo hairstyle was more than just a fashion choice. It was a global phenomenon. Women were copying her look so frequently that the US government actually asked her to change it because female factory workers were getting their hair caught in machinery. She was the definition of box office poison turned superstar, earning thousands a week while her face defined the noir era. But as the decade turned, the very studios that manufactured her image decided she was too difficult to manage. By the time she reached her 40s, the woman who once commanded the screen was essentially a ghost in New York City. The public didn't even realize she was still alive until a reporter found her working as a cocktail waitress at the Martha Washington Hotel. She wasn't doing it as a method acting exercise, she was doing it to pay rent. When she passed away at 50, her bank account was nearly empty, and she had spent her final days in a hospital bed with no family present. It's a chilling example of how the industry treats a brand once the packaging starts to show age. She died as a footnote, a forgotten server who used to be the most imitated woman in the world. Number 3. Bela Lugosi. If you close your eyes and imagine Dracula, you're likely seeing Bela Lugosi. He didn't just play the Count. He defined the modern vampire, from the hypnotic stare to the thick, aristocratic accent. At the peak of his fame, Lugosi was receiving more fan mail than many romantic leads. However, that iconic performance became a gilded cage. He found himself trapped in a cycle of increasingly low-budget horror parodies, becoming a caricature of the very monster that made him a star. By the mid-1950s, Lugosi was living in a modest apartment in Los Angeles, largely abandoned by the major studios. While his younger contemporaries were moving into the era of television and method acting, Lugosi was struggling with severe health issues and the financial strain of long-term medical care. The disconnect between his legendary status and his reality was jarring. When he suffered a heart attack in his sleep at age 73, he was far from the wealthy aristocrat people imagined him to be. In a final, perhaps poetic, act of clinging to the only identity the world allowed him, he was buried wearing his trademark black velvet cape. He passed away as a man who had been consumed by his own creation, forgotten by an industry that had moved on to newer, flashier terrors. Number 4. Hattie McDaniel. Hattie McDaniel made history in 1940 as the first African American to win an Academy Award. But the night of her greatest triumph was a preview of the isolation that would follow. Because the hotel hosting the ceremony was segregated, she was forced to sit at a small table against a far wall, separated from her Gone with the Wind co-stars. She had shattered a ceiling, yet the industry only offered her two choices: play the mammy archetype or don't work at all. This placed her in a painful cultural limbo, criticized by activists for her roles while being marginalized by a Hollywood that refused to see her as a leading lady. By the early 1950s, the roles dried up and her health began to fail. When she succumbed to illness at age 59, her final wishes provided a stinging commentary on the world she left behind. She wanted to be buried in Hollywood Forever Cemetery, the resting place of the silver screen's elite. Even in death, she was rejected. The cemetery's whites-only policy at the time forced her family to find a plot elsewhere. For decades, the first Black Oscar winner's story remained a quiet, overlooked chapter of history, proving that even a groundbreaking achievement wasn't enough to guarantee a place in the industry's heart. Number 5. Mickey Rooney. If you look at the box office charts from 1939, Mickey Rooney wasn't just a star, he was the biggest draw in the world, outranking even Clark Gable. He was the hyperactive heart of MGM, a song and dance man who seemed to have endless energy and a career that would last forever. But Rooney's life became a long, grueling lesson in the difference between fame and security. Despite working for nearly 9 decades, the massive wealth generated by his Andy Hardy days vanished through a series of fractured marriages and poor financial management. The most unsettling part of Rooney's story isn't that he ran out of money, but the silence that surrounded his final years. Behind the scenes of his occasional late-career cameos, he was entangled in a bitter legal struggle, eventually testifying before Congress about elder abuse and being stripped of his own earnings by those closest to him. When he died in 2014 at the age of 93, the man who had once been the face of American youth had only a few $1,000s to his name. He passed away in a modest room, separated from his wife and most of his belongings, proving that even 90 years of show business doesn't buy a seat at the table once the cameras stop rolling for good. Number 6. Margaret Hamilton. Most people don't know her name, but everyone knows her cackle. As the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, Margaret Hamilton created the definitive blueprint for movie villainy. She was a former kindergarten teacher who took the role so seriously that she suffered second-degree burns during a pyrotechnic mishap on set. Yet, despite being the face of nightmares for generations of children, Hamilton never enjoyed the movie star lifestyle. She became a character actress hidden behind prosthetic noses and green paint, a face that was everywhere while the woman behind it remained invisible. As the decades passed, Hamilton slipped into the quiet life of a working actress, doing coffee commercials and small television guest spots just to maintain her insurance. There was no grand mansion or Hollywood entourage. By the time she moved into a nursing home in Connecticut in the 1980s, she was just another elderly resident to the staff, not a cinematic icon. When she passed away in her sleep at age 82, the news cycle barely blinked. It was only when the obituaries ran the next day that the public realized the witch from their childhood had been living and dying in total anonymity. She lived long enough to see her character become a permanent part of pop culture, while she herself became a stranger to the very audience she terrified. Number 7. Anita Ekberg. In 1960, Anita Ekberg became an immortal image of Italian cinema, wading through the Trevi Fountain in a black velvet dress for La Dolce Vita. She was the Iceberg, a Swedish bombshell whose physicality and presence were so overwhelming that they redefined the concept of a muse. For a time, She was the center of the European film universe, a woman whose beauty felt like a force of nature. But Hollywood and Rome are notoriously unkind to icons once they lose their commercial luster, and Ekberg's career eventually slowed to a crawl of forgettable roles. The reality of her final years was a stark departure from the luxury of the fountain. After her home was damaged by a fire and looted by burglars, she found herself destitute and physically unable to care for herself. Without children or close family to lean on, the woman who once epitomized the sweet life had to apply for emergency grants from a foundation established by Federico Fellini, a plea for help from the very industry she helped build. She spent her last days in a modest care facility outside Rome, largely forgotten by the public that once treated her like a goddess. When she passed away at 83, there was no glamour left, only the quiet dignity of a woman who had outlived her own legend. Number 8. Corey Haim. In the late 1980s, Corey Haim was the face of every teenage girl's bedroom wall. As one half of the two Coreys, his charismatic performances in The Lost Boys and Lucas made him a multimillionaire before he was old enough to drive. He wasn't just a child actor, he was a cultural phenomenon who seemed destined for a lifelong career. However, the transition from teen idol to adult actor is a notoriously dangerous bridge, and for Haim, it was a bridge that collapsed under the weight of industry pressures and a lack of institutional support. By the mid-2000s, Haim's life had become a cycle of failed attempts to reclaim his spot in the sun. The most heartbreaking evidence of his decline wasn't just his lack of work, but a 2008 Craigslist ad he reportedly posted, offering his services as an actor to anyone who would hire him. When he passed away in 2010 at the age of 38, he was living with his mother in a cramped apartment, sleeping on a sofa. He died with no assets, and the financial situation was so dire that a memorabilia company reportedly had to step in to help cover his funeral expenses. His story is a blunt reminder that Hollywood often treats young talent like a disposable commodity, celebrated intensely while they're useful, and left to navigate the wreckage alone once the trend changes. Number 9. Linda Darnell. In the 1940s, Linda Darnell was the quintessential brunette beauty of 20th Century Fox, starring in masterpieces like My Darling Clementine and A Letter to Three Wives. She was a contract girl who had been pushed into the industry by her mother at just 15, becoming a breadwinner before she even understood the world. For a decade, her face was everywhere, representing the peak of Hollywood's studio-manufactured glamour. But as the 1950s arrived and her contract ended, she found that the industry had little interest in an actress approaching her 30s who didn't have a powerful protector. Her decline wasn't a sudden crash, but a slow, painful slide into obscurity. She moved from grand sets to regional theater and low-budget television, often struggling with her own sense of worth after being discarded by the system. The most haunting detail of her end came in 1965. While staying at her former secretary's small suburban house in Illinois, a fire broke out. Ironically, she was reportedly watching one of her own old films on television when the tragedy started. She passed away from her injuries at only 41 years old. Despite her years of stardom, her ashes remained unclaimed in a funeral home for a decade, eventually placed in a friend's family plot because the industry she helped build had effectively deleted her from its payroll and its memory. Number 10. Charles Laughton. Charles Laughton was once considered the greatest actor of his generation, a man whose range shifted effortlessly from the tyrannical Captain Bligh in Mutiny on the Bounty to the tragic, sensitive Quasimodo. He didn't have the traditional leading man looks, but his voice and presence were so commanding that he became the first British actor to win an Oscar for a leading role. He was a titan of the stage and screen, a man whose intellect and talent made him a pillar of the Hollywood establishment for decades. Yet Laughton lived his life in a state of quiet, internal exile. Despite his public success, he struggled with deep-seated insecurities about his appearance and was forced to keep his private life hidden due to the social constraints of the time. As the 1960s approached, the industry's focus shifted toward a new breed of gritty, youthful actors, and the theatrical grandness that Laughton epitomized began to feel like a relic of a bygone era. When he passed away in 1962, the world was preoccupied with the Cuban Missile Crisis and a rapidly changing cultural landscape. His death didn't spark the massive public mourning one might expect for a performer of his caliber. Instead, he slipped away quietly, leaving behind a body of work that remains influential, even if the man himself had become a shadowy figure in his final years. He remains the ultimate example of how even the most brilliant artistic mind can eventually be eclipsed by the simple, relentless march of time.